The cargo ship Tal Shara moved through the darkness of space like a silver insect crawling across an endless black wall. Inside the bridge, Captain Velcor studied the scanner readings with his compound eyes, his antennae twitching with concern. The Vrin captain had been flying this route for 12 years and he knew when something was wrong. "Captain, there's debris ahead," Navigator Thexel said from his station. The young Vrin's voice carried a nervous edge. "Looks like a destroyed vessel. Multiple pieces scattered across half a kilometer." Velcor clicked his mandibles together, a sign of worry among his kind. Debris fields meant pirates or accidents, and both were bad news for a lightly armed merchant ship. "Reduce speed. Keep the shields up and scan everything twice." The bridge fell quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. The other crew members continued their work, but Velcor could sense their fear. It was in the way their hands trembled slightly over the controls, in the way they kept glancing at the empty space around them. "Captain, I'm picking up something else," Thexel said suddenly. "A small pod. It's still active. Life support is on, but barely functioning." "What kind of pod?" Engineer Krelian asked from his station near the back of the bridge. The Psi. Old Vrin had seen many things in his long life, and his voice carried the weight of experience. Thexel worked the scanner for a moment. "It's human design, old salvage model. Someone's inside, Captain." The bridge went completely silent. Every Vrin stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the captain. Velcor felt his blood go cold despite the warm temperature of the bridge. "Human," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. One life form. Readings are weak but stable." Velcor stood frozen. Everyone in the galaxy knew about humans. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that everything there was trying to kill everything else. The stories said humans could survive without water for days, could heal from wounds that would kill other species, could eat food that was literally poisonous to everyone else. They were predators, apex hunters, and worst of all, they were unpredictable. "We should leave it," Krelian said firmly. "Nothing good comes from picking up humans. I've heard the stories, Captain. They're violent, aggressive, and dangerous." "But galactic law requires us to respond to distress signals," Thexil said hesitantly. "If we ignore it and someone finds out." Velcor knew they were both right. He looked at the scanner display, at the tiny pod drifting alone in the debris field. Inside was a living being, perhaps dying, perhaps already going mad from isolation. Every instinct told him to run, to pretend they had never seen it. But he was a captain, and captains had duties. "Bring it aboard," he said finally. "But take every precaution. I want 2 sealed doors between the cargo bay and the rest of the ship. Full decontamination protocols. And someone find me a weapon, any weapon." The crew moved to follow his orders, but their fear was obvious. As the Tal Shara approached the pod, Velcor watched through the external cameras. The pod was battered and scorched, clearly damaged in whatever had destroyed the ship it came from. Burn marks covered its surface and one side was completely crushed. The ship's cargo bay doors opened, and the mechanical arms reached out to grab the pod. It took several minutes to secure it and bring it inside. Once the bay doors closed, Velcor ordered the atmosphere restored. "Life signs?" he asked. "Still there," Thexil reported. "Getting stronger, actually. I think the pod's life support is almost dead. A few more hours and—" He didn't need to finish. They all understood. Velcor made his way down to the cargo bay, followed by Krelian and 2 other crew members. They stood behind a reinforced window looking down at the pod through thick glass. A medical officer stood nearby with a scanner, though what good Vrin medicine would do for a human, Velcor didn't know. "Opening the pod now," the cargo bay computer announced. The pod's door hissed and cracked open. Smoke or steam poured out, and for a moment they couldn't see anything. Then a figure stumbled forward and collapsed onto the cargo bay floor. It was smaller than Velcor expected. The stories always made. Humans sound like giants, towering monsters with massive muscles. This one was thin, wearing a torn salvage suit covered in burn marks and dried blood. Dark hair hung over its face, and its breathing was labored and painful to hear. "It's dying," the medical officer whispered. But then the human moved. Slowly, painfully. It pushed itself up onto its hands and knees. It coughed violently, and Velcor saw blood on the cargo bay floor. The human stayed there for a long moment, just breathing, just existing. Then it looked up. Velcor jumped back from the window. The human's eyes found them immediately through the glass. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held an intelligence that made Velcor's skin crawl. This wasn't an animal. This was something that could think, could plan, could hunt. The human tried to stand, but fell. It tried again and managed to get to its feet this time, swaying but upright. It looked around the cargo bay, taking in every detail, clearly assessing the situation. Then it looked back at the window and raised one hand slowly. "What's it doing?" Thexil asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I think," Krillian said slowly, "it's trying to show us it's not a threat." The human's hand was empty, palm forward. It was a gesture of peace, or at least an attempt at one. The human took a step forward, then stopped when it saw them all move back. It seemed to understand their fear. "Medical officer, can you scan it from here?" Velcor asked. "Already doing it, Captain. The readings are strange. Its body temperature is too high, heart rate is elevated, multiple injuries including broken bones, dehydration, and what looks like radiation exposure. Captain, the pod's logs show it's been in there for 12 days. 12 days? Velcor said in shock. That's impossible. The pod only had life support for 3 days maximum. I know, sir, but the human is still alive. They all stared at the figure in the cargo bay. It stood there, watching them, waiting. Finally, Velcor activated the intercom. "Can you understand me?" he asked in standard galactic trade language. The human nodded slowly. "We're going to help you," Velcor said, though every instinct screamed at him to open the bay doors and blast the human back into space. "But you need to follow our instructions exactly, do you understand?" Another nod. Velcor took a deep breath. "Then welcome aboard the Tal Shara. Try not to kill us." Hyunwoo sat in the small storage room they had given him and tried not to move too much. Every breath hurt. His ribs were definitely broken, maybe 3 of them on his left side. The radiation burns on his arm stung, despite the medical gel the Vryn doctor had nervously applied. But he was alive, and that was more than he had expected when his ship exploded. The room was tiny, barely 3 meters across, with walls made of some kind of smooth metal alloy. There was a sleeping pad on the floor, a water dispenser that took him 10 minutes to figure out how to use, and a camera in the corner that watched his every move. He didn't blame them for the camera. If their positions were reversed, if he had found a scared alien on his ship, he would have watched them too. He could hear them sometimes through the walls. The Vryn spoke in clicking sounds and whistles that the ship's translator converted to words he could understand. Most of what he heard was fear. Fear of him. Fear of what he might do. One of them, the old engineer, kept suggesting they should drug his food or lock him in stasis until they reached a station. Hyunwoo found it almost funny. He was so weak he could barely stand without getting dizzy. He had no weapons, no tools, nothing but the torn clothes on his back. But to these aliens he was a monster from their nightmares. He had just managed to fall into an uncomfortable sleep when the alarm went off. The sound was loud and harsh, cutting through the walls like a knife. Hyunwoo jerked awake, his military training kicking in before his brain fully processed what was happening. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside his door. He could hear shouting in the distance. He pressed his ear against the door, listening. The ship's automated voice was repeating something in the Vryn language, then in trade language. Hull breach detected. Multiple unauthorized boarding attempts. All crew report to bridge. Pirates. Hyunwoo pounded on the door. "Hey, let me out. I can help." No response. He pounded again, harder. "Listen to me. If pirates are boarding, you need every person who can fight. Let me out." Still nothing. He could hear running footsteps in the corridor, the sound of the crew rushing to the bridge. They were leaving him here, locked in this room while their ship was being taken. He cursed in Korean and looked around the storage room. There had to be something he could use. The walls were solid, no weak points he could see. The door was sealed electronically, no manual override on his side. The ventilation shaft in the ceiling was too small even for his frame. Through the walls he heard a new sound. metal screaming as it was cut apart. The pirates were using torches to breach the airlocks. Standard tactic. Most merchant ships like this one had weak points in their hull design, places where the armor was thinner to save on weight and cost. Hyun-woo sat back down on the sleeping pad and waited. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline fighting against his exhaustion. He had been in combat before, back during his military service. He knew how boarding actions worked. The pirates would come in fast and violent, overwhelming any resistance before the crew could organize a defense. The Vryn didn't stand a chance. More sounds echoed through the ship. Heavy footsteps. Nothing like the light clicking of Vryn feet. These were heavier, harder, the steps of creatures built for fighting. Hyun-woo heard shouting, then weapons fire. Energy weapons, probably plasma rifles based on the sound. Then screaming. The screams were short, cut off quickly. The Vryn were being slaughtered or captured. Hyun-woo jumped to his feet and pounded on the door again, harder this time. His fists ached, but he didn't care. Let me out. Damn it, let me out. On the camera feed somewhere on the bridge, he knew they could see him. But would they? Would the terrified crew trust the monster they had rescued enough to release him? The answer came 30 seconds later. His door suddenly hissed and slid open. Hyun-woo didn't waste time wondering who had done it. He stepped out into the corridor and immediately assessed the situation. The corridor was empty, but he could hear fighting in the distance toward the front of the ship. The storage room was in the aft section near engineering. The pirates were coming from multiple breach points, standard boarding tactics to divide the crew's attention. He needed weapons. He needed tools. He needed anything that could help him survive. The storage room next to his was unlocked. He stepped inside and found exactly what he needed. Engineering supplies, plasma torches for cutting metal, compressed air canisters, rolls of cable, a toolbox full of wrenches and cutting implements. Hyun-woo grabbed a plasma torch and tested it. The flame shot out bright blue and hot enough to cut through the ship's hull. He adjusted it to maximum power and clipped it to his belt. The compressed air canister was next. He found some wire and electrical components, his hands working automatically as his mind raced through possibilities. 5 minutes. That's all it took to turn a simple air canister into an improvised explosive. It wouldn't be powerful enough to breach the hull, but it would be enough to kill or seriously injure anyone near it when it went off. He made 3 more. A large piece of bulkhead plating had been stored in the corner, probably for repairs. Hyun-woo grabbed it and used the plasma torch to cut off a section about half a meter long. He worked the edges, sharpening one side as best he could. It wouldn't win any awards for craftsmanship, but it would cut flesh and break bones. Armed with his improvised weapons, Hyun-woo moved toward the sounds of fighting. The corridor branched ahead, one path leading to the bridge, the other to the main cargo bay where the largest breach would be. He chose the cargo bay. As he moved, he passed a wall panel with access to the ship's environmental controls. An idea formed in his mind. He opened the panel and studied the controls for a moment. The system was similar to human ships, just with different labels. He found what he needed and started programming in commands. The lights in certain sections of the ship would go dark in 30 seconds. The atmosphere in those same sections would vent, not all of it, just enough to make it hard to breathe and see. And the artificial gravity would fluctuate, throwing off balance and aim. Hyun-woo smiled grimly. Time to even the odds. He reached the cargo bay just as the first pirate came through the breached airlock. The creature was massive, easily 2.5 meters tall, with scales like armor plating and muscles that made Hyun-woo look like a child by comparison. It carried a plasma rifle that looked more like a cannon. The pirate stepped through the airlock, confident and arrogant. It probably thought this would be like every other merchant ship it had raided. Easy prey, no resistance. It died thinking that Hyun-woo had placed his first improvised explosive just inside the cargo bay, hidden behind a stack of supply crates. When the pirate's heavy foot hit the pressure trigger, the canister exploded with a loud bang and a shower of shrapnel. The pirate screamed and fell backward through the airlock into its boarding ship. Hyun-woo heard shouting in an alien language he didn't recognize. Good. Let them be confused. Let them be scared. The lights went out right on schedule. In the darkness of the cargo bay, Hyun-woo moved like a ghost. His eyes adjusted quickly to the dim emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red and black. The pirates were shouting to each other, trying to organize, trying to understand what had just happened. They had expected frightened Vryn crew members, not explosions and tactical countermeasures. 3 more pirates entered through the breach, moving more carefully now. They were Krall, Hyun-woo realized, recognizing them from the security briefings he had studied during his military service. Krall were slavers and raiders, known throughout this sector for their brutality. They were big, strong, and mean, but they weren't smart. They relied on overwhelming force and intimidation. Hyun-woo had neither of those advantages. But he had something they didn't. He had experience fighting on ships in close quarters in the dark, and he had nothing to lose. He watched them from his hiding spot behind a stack of cargo containers. The pirates split up, 2 heading toward the main corridor, 1 staying to guard the breach. Standard patrol pattern, predictable. The guard was the first to die. Hyun-woo waited until the other 2 disappeared through the doorway. Then he moved. His broken ribs screamed in protest, but he ignored the pain, focusing on the target. The guard was facing away from him, watching the corridor where his companions had gone. The sharpened bulkhead plating slid between the scales on the back of the guard's neck. Hyun-woo knew anatomy, knew where major blood vessels ran, knew where to cut to kill quickly and quietly. The guard made a gurgling sound and collapsed. Hyun-woo grabbed its plasma rifle and checked the charge. 70%. Good enough. He dragged the body behind the containers and moved on. The 2 pirates in the corridor were easier to track than they thought. They were heavy, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Hyun-woo followed at a distance, staying in the shadows, moving when they moved, stopping when they stopped. When they reached an intersection, Hyun-woo triggered another environmental control he had programmed. The gravity in that section suddenly tripled. Both pirates crashed to the floor with surprised roars, their own weight crushing them down. Hyun-woo stepped into the intersection and fired the plasma rifle twice. The shots were loud in the enclosed space, and he knew every pirate on the ship would hear them. But these 2 wouldn't be reporting his position to anyone. He moved quickly, knowing he had maybe 2 minutes before the rest of the boarding party converged on this location. He found a maintenance access tunnel, one of the narrow passages that ran behind the walls for repair work. It was barely big enough for him to crawl through, far too small for the massive Krall. On the bridge, the Vryn crew watched their monitors in stunned silence. Captain Velcor stared at the screen showing the cargo bay, at the dead pirates, at the human disappearing into the walls like some kind of nightmare creature. "This is impossible," Thexel whispered. "Those are Krall raiders. They're over 2 meters tall. They have armor scales. They're trained fighters. And yet they're dead," Krillian said quietly. "The human is hunting them." "We need to help him," Velcor decided. "Thexel, pull up the ship's internal layout. Show me where the other pirates are." The navigator's hands shook as he worked the controls. "There are 5 more, Captain. 3 are heading toward the cargo bay where the human is. 2 are coming toward us toward the bridge. Then we help with what we can." Velcor activated the ship-wide intercom. "Human, can you hear me?" In the maintenance tunnel, Hyun-woo paused. The captain's voice came through the speakers built into the walls. "I hear you. 3 pirates are converging on your location from different directions. 1 from the portside corridor, 2 from the engineering section." "Understood. Keep talking. Tell me what you see." And so began the strangest partnership Velcor had ever experienced. He watched the monitors and called out positions and movements. The human moved through the ship like water, always flowing, never staying in one place. He used the maintenance tunnels, the ventilation systems, the cargo lifts, anything that gave him an advantage. The pirates grew frustrated. They had come for an easy target and found themselves being picked off one by one. Hyun-woo used his improvised explosives to deadly effect, placing them in corridors and detonating them remotely. He used the plasma rifle when he had clear shots, then discarded it when the charge ran out, and grabbed weapons from fallen pirates. But the fighting took its toll. During an encounter with 2 pirates in the engineering bay, Hyun-woo took a hit. A plasma bolt grazed his left arm, burning through his sleeve and scorching the skin beneath. The pain was intense, like being branded with hot metal. He rolled behind a generator and fired back, killing 1 pirate. The second one charged him, roaring in anger. Hyun-woo couldn't outrun it, couldn't outfight it in direct combat. So he didn't try. He grabbed a wrench from his belt and threw it at the generator's control panel. The panel sparked and exploded, releasing a burst of superheated steam. The pirate ran straight into the cloud and stumbled, its vision blocked, its scales burning from the heat. Hyun-woo finished it with 3 shots to the head. He leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm from the plasma burn. His ribs felt like broken glass grinding together. Every muscle in his body ached. He had been awake for over 30 hours, had survived 12 days in a failing life support pod, and now he was fighting for his life against professional raiders, but he wasn't done yet. "Captain," he said into the intercom. "How many left?" "2, including their leader." "He's big, human. Bigger than the others. He's heading for the bridge with the last raider. Then I need to get there first." "Which route is fastest?" Velcor studied the layout. "The main corridor, but it's a straight line. They'll see you coming. That's fine. I want them to see me coming." Hyunwoo stepped into the main corridor and started walking toward the bridge. His makeshift blade was in one hand, a plasma pistol he had taken from a dead pirate in the other. He was covered in blood, some of it his, most of it not. His steps were steady despite his injuries. The crawl leader saw him coming and stopped. This was Gormash, a raider with over 50 successful ship captures to his name. He had killed hundreds of beings, had never failed a raid, had never lost a fight. He looked at the small human limping toward him and laughed. "You're a brave little thing," Gormash said in trade language, his voice like grinding rocks. "But bravery won't save you." Hyunwoo didn't respond. He just kept walking. The last raider with Gormash raised its weapon, but the leader held up a hand. "No, this one is mine. I want to break it myself." They met in the middle of the corridor, human and crawl, predator and apex predator. On the bridge, the Vryn crew held their breath and watched. Gormash was the biggest crawl that Hyunwoo had ever seen. The raider leader stood nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that looked like they could stop bullets. Scars covered his arms and face, trophies from a lifetime of violence. His eyes were yellow and cold, filled with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Hyunwoo knew he couldn't win this in direct combat. He was maybe 170 centimeters tall on a good day, and right now he was injured, exhausted, and running on pure adrenaline. But he had learned long ago that fights weren't won by the strongest. They were won by the smartest, the most desperate, and the one willing to do whatever it took to survive. "Last chance, little human," Gormash said, flexing his clawed hands. "Surrender now and I'll kill you quickly. Fight me and I'll make it last for hours." Hyunwoo's response was to throw his plasma pistol at Gormash's face. The weapon bounced off the crawl's scales harmlessly, but it made him flinch for just a second. That second was all Hyunwoo needed. He rushed forward, not at Gormash but at the other raider standing behind him. The raider barely had time to register the movement before Hyunwoo slid between its legs and slashed upward with his sharpened bulkhead blade. The cut was deep and vicious, targeting the softer scales under the raider's thigh where major arteries ran. Blood sprayed across the corridor. Gormash roared in anger and swung a massive fist at Hyunwoo. The human rolled away, using the wounded raider as a shield. The fist connected with the raider instead, crushing its skull with a sickening crunch. Gormash didn't even seem to notice he had killed his own crew member. "Clever," Gormash admitted, his voice a low growl. "But tricks won't save you." The corridor was too narrow for fancy movements, too open for hiding. This was going to be brutal and straightforward. Gormash charged, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. Hyunwoo waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat and rolled to the side. Gormash's momentum carried him forward, and he slammed into the wall behind where Hyunwoo had been standing. The impact left a dent in the metal. Hyunwoo used the moment to scramble to his feet and run, not away from the bridge, but toward it. He could hear Gormash turning around, could hear the raider leader's angry breathing as he gave chase. The bridge doors were sealed shut. Hyunwoo pounded on them once. "Open up now!" Inside, Captain Velcor hesitated. If they opened the doors, the human might survive. But Gormash would reach the bridge too, would kill them all. If they kept the doors closed, the human would die. But they would be safe for a few more minutes until the pirates cut through. "Open the doors," Krillyan said suddenly. "Are you insane?" Another crew member shrieked. "Open them now or I will," the old engineer shouted. Velcor looked at the monitor showing Hyunwoo standing at the door, covered in blood and injuries, still fighting. Still trying to protect them despite everything. The captain made his decision and hit the door control. Hyunwoo fell through as the doors slid open. He rolled and came up in a crouch, turning back to face the corridor. "Close it. Close it now." But it was too late. Gormash was already there, his massive hand catching the edge of the door before it could seal. He forced it open with raw strength, the hydraulics screaming in protest. The crawl leader stepped onto the bridge and looked around at the cowering Vryn crew with satisfaction. "Finally," he said. "Now I have hostages. Human, drop your weapon or I start breaking them one by one." The Vryn crew pressed themselves against the far wall, their antennae flat against their heads in terror. Hyunwoo stood between them and Gormash, still holding his blade, still ready to fight despite the impossibility of the situation. "Don't do it," Velkor said quietly. "Save yourself. We're already dead." "No one else dies today," Hyunwoo said firmly. He looked around the bridge, his combat-trained mind cataloging everything in seconds. The control panels, the exposed wiring behind a damaged console, the emergency power conduits running along the ceiling, the fire suppression system that used chemical foam. An idea formed. It was insane. It would probably kill him, but it might work. "Captain," Hyunwoo said calmly, never taking his eyes off Gormash. "When I tell you to, activate the fire suppression system in this room and seal the bridge. Do you understand? That will cover everything in foam. We won't be able to see, won't be able to breathe properly. I know. Do it anyway when I give the word." Gormash laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "What are you planning, little human? You think foam will stop me?" "No," Hyunwoo said. "But this might." He moved fast, faster than his injuries should have allowed. He rushed toward the damaged console, grabbed a handful of exposed wiring and turned back to Gormash. The crawl leader lunged forward, clawed hands reaching to tear the human apart. "Now!" Hyunwoo shouted. The fire suppression system activated instantly, flooding the bridge with thick white foam. It covered everything in seconds, filling the room with a choking cloud that made it impossible to see or breathe normally. The Vryn crew pulled their uniforms over their faces, trying to filter the air. In the chaos and confusion, Hyunwoo did something completely insane. He jammed the exposed wiring into a power conduit in the wall, then grabbed the metal railing that ran around the bridge. Gormash, blind in the foam, reached out and grabbed Hyunwoo by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "Gotcha," Gormash snarled. "Yeah," Hyunwoo gasped, his hands finding Gormash's armored chest. "You did." He pressed the live wires against Gormash's scales. "Electricity doesn't care how big you are or how tough your armor is. It finds the path of least resistance and follows it." The current flowed from the power conduit, through the wires, through Gormash's body, through Hyunwoo, who was still touching the metal railing, and into the ship's ground. Both of them convulsed as thousands of volts coursed through their bodies. Gormash's grip tightened on Hyunwoo's throat, then went slack. The massive crawl fell backward, smoke rising from his scales. Hyunwoo collapsed beside him, his body twitching from the electrical shock. The foam began to dissipate as the emergency ventilation kicked in. The Vryn crew emerged from their hiding spots, staring in horror at the scene. Both the human and the crawl leader lay motionless on the floor, neither one moving. "The human," Thexel whispered. "Is he—" Velkor rushed forward and knelt beside Hyunwoo. He placed a shaking hand near the human's nose and felt warm breath. "He's alive. Barely, but alive." Krillian was already moving to the medical supplies. "Get him to the medical bay, now! We don't have much time." They lifted Hyunwoo carefully, trying not to cause more damage to his broken body. As they carried him out of the bridge, Velkor looked back at Gormash's corpse. The infamous raider leader, terror of this entire sector, killed by a single injured human who refused to give up. The captain clicked his mandibles together slowly, a gesture of respect among the Vryn. Then he followed his crew to save the life of their savior. The medical bay of the Tal Shara was small and designed for Vryn physiology, which meant that everything was slightly wrong for treating a human. The beds were too short, the equipment calibrated for the wrong species, and the medicines were mostly useless or potentially dangerous. But the crew did their best. Krillian worked with surprising skill for an engineer, his hands steady as he connected monitoring equipment to Hyunwoo's unconscious body. The medical officer, a young Vryn named Talris, pulled up every file on human biology that the ship's database contained. It wasn't much, just basic information from first contact records and trade agreements. "His heart rate is too fast," Talris said nervously, watching the monitors. "At least I think it is. The database says human hearts beat 60 to 100 times per minute at rest, but his is at 140. "That's not rest," Krillian said. "That's his body in emergency mode, trying to heal. Look at his cellular activity. It's 3 times faster than ours." Captain Velkor stood in the corner, watching. He had sent the rest of the crew to secure the ship, to make sure no other pirates had boarded to seal the breaches. But he couldn't leave the medical bay. He needed to see if the human would survive. The electrical burns are severe, Talris continued, applying a healing gel designed for Vrin's skin. He had no idea if it would work on humans. He has internal injuries from the electricity coursing through his body. Third-degree burns on his hands where he held the wires, and that's on top of his broken ribs, the plasma burn on his arm, and the dehydration and radiation exposure from the pod. But he's alive, Velcor said quietly. For now. They worked for hours, doing everything they could with their limited knowledge and resources. They stabilized his heart rate, treated his burns, set his broken ribs as best they could. Hyunwoo remained unconscious through it all, his body fighting its own battle for survival. On the third day, he woke up. His eyes opened slowly, taking in the unfamiliar ceiling above him. Pain washed over him immediately, every nerve ending reporting damage. He tried to sit up and gasped as his ribs protested violently. "Don't move," a voice said. Velcor stepped into his field of vision. "You're badly injured. You need to rest." "The pirates?" Hyunwoo's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "All dead. You killed them. All 7 of them." Hyunwoo closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "Good, your crew?" "All alive, thanks to you. We're 2 days from the nearest station. You'll receive proper medical care there." They fell into silence. Hyunwoo could see the question in the captain's eyes, the confusion and curiosity that all of the Vrin seemed to share. "Why did you do it?" Velcor finally asked. "Why did you fight for us? We locked you in a room. We were afraid of you. We treated you like a prisoner. You gave me water," Hyunwoo said simply. "You brought me aboard when you could have left me in that pod to die. That's all the reason I needed. But you almost died. You pushed your body beyond its limits. The medical officer says you should be dead from your injuries." Hyunwoo managed a weak smile. "Humans are hard to kill. It's what we do best, survive." Over the next few days, as Hyunwoo slowly recovered, the crew's attitude toward him changed completely. The fear disappeared, replaced by curiosity and respect. They brought him food, even though most of it he couldn't eat because it was designed for Vrin digestion. They asked him questions about Earth, about humans, about his life. Thexel spent hours in the medical bay, fascinated by human biology. "Your planet sounds terrifying," the young navigator said. "Storms that can destroy entire cities? Temperature swings of 50 degrees? Predators everywhere." "It's home," Hyunwoo said. "You adapt or you die. That's how Earth works. And that's why you can do what you did. You're adapted for survival. We all are in our own ways. Your people are adapted for different things. Logic, efficiency, cooperation. My people are adapted for chaos and change." Krillian visited too, bringing tools and showing Hyunwoo the improvised weapons he had created. "Brilliant," the old engineer said, studying the explosive devices with professional appreciation. "Simple, effective, and made from common materials. You turned our own ship into a weapon against the pirates. My old sergeant taught me that. He used to say that everything is a weapon if you're creative enough." On the 5th day, Hyunwoo was well enough to walk. His ribs still hurt and his hands were covered in bandages, but he could move around. Velcor gave him a tour of the ship, showing him the damage from the pirate attack and the repairs they were making. When they reached the bridge, the entire crew was there. They all stopped what they were doing and turned to look at him. For a moment, Hyunwoo tensed, old reflexes making him prepare for a threat. But then Velcor stepped forward and did something unexpected. The captain bowed. Not a nod, but a full formal bow. The kind that Vrin reserved for their highest leaders. One by one, the entire crew followed suit. "You saved our lives," Velcor said. "We owe you a debt we can never repay." Hyunwoo felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Krillian said firmly. "What anyone would do is hide or run or surrender. You fought. You protected us when you had no reason to. That's not what anyone would do. That's what a hero does." The word hung in the air. Hero. Hyunwoo had never thought of himself that way. He was just a salvage worker who had survived too many bad situations and learned to fight back. They reached the station on the 7th day. The Talshara docked smoothly, and station security was there to meet them. Word of the pirate attack had already spread through the station's network. When the security officers reviewed the ship's internal camera footage and saw what Hyunwoo had done, the story spread even faster. Within hours, Ships across the station were talking about it. The human who single-handedly defeated a crawl raiding party. The videos were uploaded to the Galactic network, viewed by millions. In trading posts and bars across the sector, beings of 100 different species watched the footage in stunned silence. Hyunwoo spent 3 days in the station's medical center. The human doctors there were amazed that he had survived. They treated his injuries properly, and by the time they released him, he was on the way to full recovery. When he returned to the Tal Shara, Captain Velcor was waiting for him at the airlock with an offer. "Stay with us," the captain said. "As security officer, as crew member, as friend. We're a merchant ship, not a warship. But if the stories about humans are true, then having you aboard means no pirate will dare touch us again." Hyunwoo looked at the ship, at the Vrin crew watching nervously from the bridge windows at the stars beyond. He thought about his old life, salvaging wrecks in dangerous space, always one mistake away from death. Then he thought about the past week, about fighting for something beyond his own survival. "All right," he said. "I'll stay." The crew celebrated that night as much as Vrin celebrated anything. They shared their food, their stories, their culture. Hyunwoo taught them Korean drinking songs even though none of them could drink alcohol. They taught him their clicking language, laughing when he got the sounds wrong. When the Tal Shara left the station the next morning, Hyunwoo stood on the bridge as an official member of the crew. He wore a uniform that had been quickly tailored to fit him, and his name was listed in the ship's manifest. Other ships in the area gave them a wide berth. Pirates who saw the Tal Shara on their scanners updated their databases with a simple warning: "Human aboard. Do not engage." Word spread through the sector, then through neighboring sectors, then across entire regions of space. The story changed with each telling, grew larger and more fantastic, but the core truth remained the same. A single human had boarded a merchant ship and protected its alien crew against overwhelming odds. The galaxy was beginning to learn something important about humans. They weren't the strongest species. They weren't the smartest or the fastest, but they had something that made them uniquely dangerous. They refused to quit. They protected those who couldn't protect themselves. And when you backed them into a corner, when you threatened those they cared about, they became the most dangerous predators in the known universe. Hyunwoo didn't think of himself as a hero or a legend. He was just a guy trying to do the right thing. But to the crew of the Tal Shara, and to the thousands of beings who heard their story, he was proof that sometimes the smallest person in the room is the one you should fear the most. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, disappearing into the void. Behind them, the legend grew.